Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Freshly Pressed. Today we have with us the creators of Glitch, Sarah and Alston. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Hi.
Very cool to be here.
Awesome. While the screen loads, I would love for you both to introduce yourselves.
Cool.
You,
I'm Sarah. I'm a co-founder and head writer at Wasteland Comics. I write Glitch, all the crazy characters and weird settings and stuff that start up in here, unless they come from Alston's concept art and then they start there and then develop here. But it's fine. Um,
It's a team
I'm a
effort.
big exactly. I'm a big D&D nerd, crazy cat lady. Uh, just general I like creative things.
nice. That's a good start. Awesome. Alston.
And I am Alston. I am the other co-founder of Glitch and Wasteland Comics. I do the art for the series. Um, and I don't have a snappy addition to that. Sarah kind of stole it. She creates the characters, and then I go kind of bananas and just kind of help flesh out the world and flesh out the visuals.
That's amazing. That's usually how it goes, right?
When you co-found something, it's hard to kind of describe it twice.
I know exactly, and it's also the chemistry between you two, right? That
hmm
gets things right in the end. So you write, and then you draw, and then you go back and forth on things, and then yeah, you see the end result.
Exactly,
Yeah.
you get it.
Yeah. Collaborating, it's my favorite part about like transitioning into comics versus like all the other mediums I had tried before because it's so solitary. And this I'm like, oh, I have like a creative partner that's like
Yeah,
helping to develop the story with visuals that I can see. And I'm someone that I geek out every time I can see like my characters on a page or something. I commission like art of my D&D characters all the time. So like having a comic where I'm like, oh, I'm seeing my story.
talking about that, do you actually like write? Because I'm also a writer, so I'm definitely interested in knowing this from other writers' point of view as well. Is do you write character backstories, and how deep do you write all of that?
Oh man, yes, I do. Um, Even characters that seem like they're background characters in this comic have character sheets in our Google Drive that have their likes and their dislikes and their hobbies and their ambitions and their backstory and their special gear and personality quirks. And that's I do blame Alston for that because it's just that like I'll see a character that they make and it's like, are we sure this is a background character? I'm just gonna figure them out just in case we want to feature them more because they look really cool. Um, but
I
yeah, they
was
just very
always
developed.
very salty about the shows that, understandably, in animation especially, you're kind of copy pasting the same character over and over again for the background. But I took that as a personal challenge to be like, no, even the background characters are going to have personality. So yeah, it
Right.
is my fault. Apologies.
No, it's no fault at all. I think that makes the world a bit more rich, right? Like, like there's always things that stand out when you look at some of these famous movies and also TV shows, right? They're like these tiny characters that have like 1 second cameos, but they stand out, or like you remember them a lot, especially because they had these quirks, these these
hmm
Yeah,
these these things that you remember.
I
Yeah,
always
that's
fall for the
amazing.
side characters. It's a problem because then I never get enough of them in the story, and I'm just like, dang it, but you're my favorite.
hmm
Yeah.
That's very evident that we are both side character people in our comic. I think that comes through very strong. Um, I have to say, the only downside to being character people is a comic has a very tight uh, limit to how much you can get on a page and in an issue. So that's always our struggle, is we want to put so much more in and we have to keep kind of narrowing it down.
That's
Yeah,
what side
yeah,
comics are for.
Side comics, side characters.
yeah. I mean, you can always have spin-offs and expansion of the world and stuff like that. So
Exactly. You get it. You know.
Yeah. Well, and it lets us, like, the fact that the background characters all kind of have their own unique looks, it also, like, allows us to plant little seeds of things where someone who seemed like a background character is actually a main character at some point that you just haven't met yet. And then you see them later, and then you read back again in the beginning, and you're like, oh, hey, that was that person. I love when that happens.
that's lovely. Yeah, me too. Like, I really love that when that happens as well. Also, you like these character traits might be some sort of plot points, right? Like at a later point of time as well. So
Hmm.
Exactly.
that's amazing. That's really good. Uh, Good. So tell us a bit about what Glitch is. What's the story about? And yeah, just tell us a bit. Give us a bit about the story of Glitch.
The little
Yeah,
glitch pitch.
a little glitch pitch, a glitchy pitch. Um, Glitch is a post-apocalyptic solar punk adventure. We learned about solar punk while we were developing it, which was very handy because we didn't know it was a genre before. And then we're like, oh, wait, this is what we're writing. That's fun. Um, so for anyone who's familiar with all the different punk genres and stuff like steampunk and cyberpunk and diesel punk and all the punks, solar punk has a focus on renewable energy and like community building and taking a more like optimistic view of the future, with like humanity living like in tandem with the world instead of against nature, which you'd think that doesn't really mesh with post-apocalyptic. Why would you put those two together? And it's like, well, you'll see as it develops. I think we find a nice unique way of blending those two to make it a very different post-apocalyptic and a very different solar punk story. So
Mhm.
if you're a fan of either of them, you'll get something a little bit different that maybe will expand your horizons. Um, but yeah, we follow teenage scavenger Ari and her pet desert kit fox Zephyr, as they eke out an existence scavenging in the wasteland, which is one of the last places on Earth that supports life still. Um, Alston
Nice.
can continue on.
Yeah, it's so kind of the story of the world is was it 100 years ago or several hundred? I always forget the
Several
timeline.
hundred.
Several
Yeah,
hundred years
several.
ago, uh, everything kind of died and no one knows why. So, as Sarah says, the entire world is just covered in sort of dead wastelands, trees, everything's been sort of petrified. And so, it's only these pockets of oasis actually in what is modern day Death Valley where there's still some vegetation and still some people who are getting along and scavenging and getting by, finding old tech from a kind of future version of our world, past version of their world. And Ari is one of those scavengers who lives even on, I'd say, the edges of that society. And kind of over the course of the story, gets pulled further and further into all of the like drama and politics and life that exists in the wasteland that even she's been kind of keeping herself away from. So
That's
Hmm.
amazing.
it's
That's
a fun little
amazing.
adventure. She tries not to get killed by all the bandits in the wasteland.
Yeah,
Wow.
as you
And
do.
Wow.
we force her to make friends
Yes,
against
we
her
do
will.
force her to make friends. That my characters are
There's
always
like,
terminal loners, and then you're forced to. It's
we will
like-
force friendship on you whether you want it or not.
Yeah, cool. So segue from there. Like, how much of those characters do you draw from real life? Like, do you base some of the character traits from your real life, or things that like happen to you play into the story a
Oh, that's a
little?
great question.
Yeah, if I do, it's probably subconscious and I haven't realized it yet. But I try to like avoid consciously doing that just because I don't want someone to like find out about it and it's maybe not the most flattering thing. And I'm like, I just like everyone. I like to be on everyone's good side and I don't need people to be like, this character seems a lot like me and they're not like a great character.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is necessarily a one-to-one, but I will say, like, there's characters we've discussed where, like, I can talk about Dusty a little bit since he's kind of new to
Yeah.
this issue, but that's a character we've talked a lot about who I don't think was ever based on anyone, but you've said, like, oh, some of the traits kind of reminded you later of your own dad. Or I certainly, when I'm designing characters or when we're, like, working back and forth talking about characters, you know, Blaine and Jaws have a lot of, like, messy masculinity to unpack, and I know I personally am always like, no, I get it, Blaine, me too. Like, I had a lot of that I was unpacking too, that I think comes out in his kind of posturing and this that. So I think it's not necessarily one of those like, oh, we're commenting on people in the real world per se, but like little elements, I can definitely say Ari's tendency to isolate herself is a little too relatable, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's always a teensy bit of at least me in almost every character that I make, which it's maybe that's from like all of my experience with like role playing and tabletop games and not because there's always like a little bit of them in you, but maybe that's why I like all of them so much. Which I'm just like I just take care of you because it's like taking care of me.
It's a form of self-care.
Taking care of my characters is taking care of me, right? Right? That counts.
Totally.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think one thing you do get from if you are into tabletop RPG games is great world building and just like you said earlier, character sheets. Character sheets are a big part of tabletop gaming as well. So
Hmm.
I when I did read Glitch issue one, that was I think a while ago actually, uh, and the thing that struck me really well was like the world building of it is amazing. Like without saying too much, there's so much in there, and with like every panel is packed with so much detail. I just really loved that part of it. So
Thank you.
um,
That means a lot to hear because it was really hard for a first issue to like, I was like, there's a lot to introduce, and I have 28 pages to do it where there still has to be a cohesive story. It's not just a world document. So I'm glad that like it came across because world building and character work are my favorite things. 100%. Plot I struggle with a little bit. That's the one that takes the most work. But I was like, as long as I have the good characters and the good world, the plot will write itself for the most part. I just have to help tailor it along, hopefully. Yeah,
nice.
thank you.
Yeah,
No,
Sarah, I'm just gonna toot her horn for a second because Sarah does an incredible job with the world building. Like, there's so much stuff that hasn't even happened in the story yet, and I cannot tell you the number of documents we have with just like pages of information. She's like keeping an eye on like articles and different like scientific discoveries that drop about like renewable energy, and she'll be like, "Oh, this is really cool. We should incorporate that into something in the background." Like, there's so much that she has put into this world, and so much that we haven't even begun to like get to scratch the surface and show of like what she's thought of. So I'm gonna toot your horn even more. It's incredible. I really can't wait to share more of it with everyone.
by all means, this is a place to toot your horn all that you want.
I'll
That's
go hide now.
awesome.
Too loud, too early. Oh no, we'll have to. I'll spread it around for the rest of the.
That's cool. I really love both these covers. Is there a story behind your cover?
Ooh.
Yes. So this cover was especially fun to work on because I knew from the get I wanted to do something a little darker. Our first cover is kind of fun action adventure kind of bright colors and everything. But this time around in issue 2, we start getting into the like actual. We don't get deep into it. We just start hinting at. You start
Yeah.
seeing kind of what Jenny, like what Glitch and
You need to break that
Ari.
habit.
I'm terrible at this. What they're kind of running from and the histories that have made these two main characters who they are. And so we get to just start touching that, start sprinkling into it. So I really wanted to start hinting at that with this cover and give us our first hint of, Sarah has some very dark elements of the comic that don't come in until much, much later in the series, but I think you get to start seeing some of the underbelly, as it were.
Mm,
So
mm,
I wanted to
mm.
have a lot of fun, trapping them with kind of symbolic representations of their angsty past.
Yeah, yeah.
we
Do
get
you?
we get dramatic backstory in this issue, and this cover really helps kind of like symbolize it.
Yeah.
Once you like read it, you know what all the symbolism is in there. I don't want to like spoil things because I think they're really neat moments. That
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of which is a page that I am so excited. Like it's probably gonna be one of the best pages we've done so far. Anyway, but
Nice.
that's
We get 2 little splash pages that I am so hype about for these backstories.
Nice.
It's going to be great.
I'm always excited about splash pages and always amazed when they show up after like so this page that's jam packed with detail and then there's a splash page that just blows
Yeah.
you away. Yeah. So yeah, that's amazing. That's
It's very exciting and a little intimidating, especially as somebody who's still fairly new to print comic formatting. I'm just over here like, I'm figuring out how to do 2-page spreads and splashes and all of that. How does this work? So I'm very excited to be doing them, but a little intimidated. I hope they come out well and everyone's really excited about them.
Mhm.
nice.
And then a shout
Yes,
out for our variant cover because working with Heather Bond was phenomenal
absolutely.
for the Kickstarter exclusive variant, and that has a lot of symbolism in it as well. That's a little more earlier on in the comic, so because we
I like to
haven't
think of it as,
introduced that character shown in the helmet visor yet. Um, so I don't
Yeah.
I love that cover, and I just I want the metal
it's
print
so
that we're
good.
offering so badly.
Yeah.
Like, I just want that for myself. Anyway,
I
distracted.
love to think of it as our villain cover. You
Yeah,
gotta have the
we got
hero
our
and the villain.
protagonist and our antagonist. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. It has so much texture to it, like that cover. Like it's just really good. Like I think,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
Heather is
Heather is a legend.
incredible at that. I
Yeah.
absolutely love the like gritty, crunchy style. It's so good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Did you a question on maybe the dark stuff you talked about? Like, did you find it hard to balance between the dark stuff and being keeping it young adult, like keeping it within that?
It was a little bit more of a challenge than in the first issue because yeah, the first issue there was a little bit of like once the Knight Rider got introduced, there it becomes a little more violent, like in a potentially lethal way. And like hinting with like the skeletons in that room in the first issue that she finds. Um, and then in this one, I think I was trying to channel. I I'm very inspired by like Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I love how
Mm,
that perfectly encapsulates like it's still clearly like appropriate for children, but it is touching on themes like genocide and the like struggles of war and like tensions between the warring countries and like prejudices and all these things that I I try to like harken back to that to see like how did they do that and try to just kind of project that because there are very important themes that like I primarily write to entertain and I want the themes to kind of just like slowly enter your subconscious while you're reading instead of being in your
yeah.
face. about it.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
it was a little bit of a challenge, and I think it's going to be more of a challenge the further we go along, because it does, like, once more information comes out, it does get significantly darker, which is
Mm.
why, like, I don't like to call it it is appropriate for like all ages, but I don't like to call it an all ages comic, because I think older audiences get a lot more out of their reading of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of young adult novels do have a lot of
mhm,
dark stuff as well. Like if you've read like his Dark Materials, or any of
mhm.
similar, like even the Narnia stuff. Sometimes they do get pretty dark. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's one of
do
my
think
favorite
it'll.
things is so many like children's media thing that's the weirdest line to walk with all of this is there's so many things I think of where I'm like some of the most horrific concepts that I have ever read or watched are in like children's media. But
Mhm.
like, so I'm like, okay, if it doesn't have sex and blood, then I definitely know. Like, if it's sex and blood, it's definitely an adult show. But barring that, I mean, replacing somebody's eyeballs with like buttons that you stitch into their face, that's okay for
It's
kids.
horrifying.
That's not okay. What is it?
As long as
Like,
you don't show the process happening, it's okay for kids. You can show the
Yeah,
final product. But so we just don't have any gory fight scenes or anything in ours, and we're fine.
but that is
don't even
definitely
get me
that
started
fun. I
on.
remember we were working on this cover. I had a few versions earlier on that we were like, is this too much? Do we have to tone it down? Let's tone it down just to be safe. That might be too far.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So.
And yeah, I was saying, like, don't even get me started on like things like Rumpelstiltskin, or like they're so dark and they're dreary and they're not suited for anyone, especially young
Mhm.
girls. Like, yeah, we don't want to teach them to be objects at that age. Like, it's just, yeah, it's just bizarre, the whole, like,
Yeah.
how folk tales are so, yeah,
Hmm.
they're so
And I think it
toxically
helps though
masculine. Yeah,
too that, like, in the end we do want to this to be like an uplifting and positive story. So like there is
exactly.
the dark, but I always try and, like, I never want it to feel like I don't want to make the reader feel defeated at all. Like I want them to feel like they're overcoming adversity with the characters. I don't like to dive too deep into that despair. I can let other comics do that.
Yeah,
Like that's fine. I
yeah.
always want to still maintain that element of like fun and vibrancy. Um,
It's that
there's a
whole like
place for bleak comics, but I don't want
Yeah.
to be that one.
totally. I like to think of it as like aiming for it's darkest before the dawn, but there is absolutely a dawn in this story. Like
Nice.
it
Nice. That's a
it's
great
not
way to
dark
put
for a
it.
while and when it does, we will still, it's that's part of solar punk is hope.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the
I
genre
always
itself
preface
screams of
saying that nothing
positivity.
will ever happen to Zephyr. Like that's a spoiler that I am always willing to give people, is because I don't like when like animal sidekicks, or like I used to work like on a talk show for The Walking Dead, and the amount of horses that die in that show, and I'm like, nothing permanently bad will ever happen to Zephyr.
I like you came in so
All of the plot
strong
armor.
with I will never hurt Zephyr, and
Like,
now
no,
you backtracked it to nothing permanently bad will happen to Zephyr. You are walking it back very quickly here. I'm nervous.
other people aren't safe, but Zephyr is safe. It's fine.
Zephyr has plot armor. That is the one
Yes,
thing we have agreed to from the beginning.
yes,
Sarah will hurt some of my favorite characters, but Zephyr will always be safe.
yes.
That's
Zephyr will
amazing.
always be safe.
So awesome. Cool. Let's go back into what actually got you both into comics. Starting with you, Sarah.
So I didn't actually grow up like with comics or anything. I did read some manga a bit. Like I would like go to a Barnes and Noble, and I would just sit in the aisle and like just read a whole, because you could read them pretty fast, and I would just kind of like read
Yep.
the whole thing
Yeah.
there. Uh, um, it wasn't
They did not like
until
you.
yeah, no. I mean, I always left with something, so it's like it was. I never just
I did
like.
the same thing. It's I also did book crimes in Barnes and Noble. It's fine.
Yeah. Um, we'll just ignore the fact that bookstores are struggling now, and it's not because of people like us. It's surely not. Um, but it wasn't until like 5 or 6 years ago when I was working on it was just like it was supposed to be a short animated script just for a portfolio for like a job I was applying to. Um, and like Alston was one of my beta readers, and they had all these questions. And so I developed even further what was once a short was now like potentially like a decade's worth of content. Um, and we were just like, once we decided like, hey, we can like work together on something because I love Alston's art. Um, but making an animated thing is so much more taxing. Like I don't want to come across like making a comic is not easy, but like it's a separate beast to make an animated short. Like
Yeah.
that, like even just
You
a
have to
few
make it
seconds
move.
of animation is so much work. And
You have
it's
to
like
do
I'm not gonna tell this big sprawling story in animation
Yeah.
on our own. Like that's not gonna happen. So we were like, comics are pretty close to animation. Like Alston had an interest in storyboarding, so there was like, you know, some experience there. And we had this great interaction at a convention. I always forget whether it was LA Comic Con or WonderCon. It was one of the two, um, where we were just kind of like wandering around trying to get a feel for like the indie comic scene, like at the different tables, like before we even really started writing. We were just kind of like talking to people about their experience, kind of getting to know. And we ran into the White Ash table with Charlie Stickney, not knowing anything about how much of a like behemoth in the industry he is, especially with like Kickstarter and everything. And the moment he heard that we were even thinking of making a comic, he went into like mentor mode and he told us about Kickstarter. He gave us all his advice. He's like, if you ever need to contact me, you can. Da, da, da. And so I think that's kind of like what really sparked it. And then I had a mutual friend connection with Hex Comics. That they're the amazing writers of Hex 11, and they kind of, in a more official way, kind of took us under their wing. With there's so many email communications with advice on how to get started because they got started all on their own. Just these three ladies who had a great story to tell. I highly recommend Hex 11. By the way, it is an
Nice.
amazing story. And we're still very close to them. We like to hang out with them at conventions. And I just really look up to them a lot because they really know what they're doing and they have their stuff together. It's
It's so together. It's such a good story, such good art. And they've been so kind and generous too. There's so many things with comics where, and this is true of any format, but particularly I had a little bit of a background in comics, so I'd read a lot of manga growing up. I'd read some like Western comics. I tried my hand at some web comics a few times in college, so I'd done it a little bit, but always in a digital format. And Hex was so kind in like helping us navigate like here are the dimensions you need to do everything at, here's how you like do lettering and Illustrator, and here's the settings you need for everything, and here's like a whole YouTube tutorial on how to like flat comics, because even like flatting them is a little different than regular illustration. Like
Yeah.
there were so many little details that like we were we did not have to do years of trial and error or months of trial and error because they were so generous. So
That's amazing.
forever insanely grateful to them and every other like the comics, like indie comics world. Once we started getting into it, everybody is just so insanely kind and welcoming and like helping each other out. It's extremely helpful and sweet, and yeah, cannot speak highly enough about everyone there.
I know. I know. I can say the same from my experience of working with like at this point I have spoken to hundreds of creators, and every single one of them has been just kind and generous to me. So yeah, I can definitely vouch for that. You're absolutely on point.
Yeah, I love
And
it.
fast. I love you guys.
That's amazing. That's really good to know. We have a share of dramas in indie comics, but
Of
you
course.
know, Twitter is not real world. In real world, people are actually nice to each
Yeah.
other.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's like my favorite part too, like at conventions. It's just like getting to know the tables around us and everything. Like just we'll just make friends with them. Like we always leave a convention with more connections than we left with. And I say connections, but they are like more like friends. Like we're just like we got to know each other. We braved this weekend together and all the people and we got this. This little like our little corner of Artist Alley or small press. We've got this.
that's amazing. Yeah. I just had we had a Oz Comic Con last weekend here in Sydney, and I got to speak to some of the loveliest creators out there. Like they, I never get to meet them online. A lot of them are actually not on Twitter or like any
Yeah.
of the social media platforms. But just to meet them in person is such a great, like yeah, it's just a fun time to hang out with those folks. So, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, conventions are a good blend for me of like the stress, but also the highs of the process, and it balances more out with that than like Kickstarters for me. I think Kickstarters lend a little more in the stress area for me than the like, oh, I'm feeling inspired and everything. I'm like, I'm very exhausted and stressed during a Kickstarter, but at a convention, I don't feel the exhaustion until like a week after it has ended, and then I suddenly crash because I'm just on this high of being surrounded by like all these people in person. It's my people, it's my nerds. Like, come on.
Yeah, very very true. Very very true. Awesome. Quick segue. So I this is a question, the dreaded question I ask everyone. Your inspirations behind some of your work and your top five favorite. I'll say pop culture stuff. You can categorize it any way you want. Like it could be a movie or a TV show. Things that had the biggest impact on you, in your say writing or growing up, even in life. So yeah.
Mhm. Let's see. I already mentioned Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I know is one that's kind of like shared between the two of us. It
Real
influences the
fast,
art
I was
and the
going to
story.
say, before Sarah gets into it, I just want the record to say we've discussed this a lot. We are a very fun blend because you have a lot of like touch points in video games, which I don't play a lot of, so I'm over here like no clue, but great. And then you actually do watch a lot of the animated stuff too, but like I have a lot of touch points in like animated things and anime, and so it's a
Hmm.
fun blend of having two kind of very different but extremely complementary um,
Mm,
Yeah.
touch points. But Avatar is one of our joiners.
nice.
Yes. Um, let's see. I was actually my storytelling is very influenced by, which is weird to say because they don't usually have scripts with these movies, but Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki films. Because I just, and I've been told this by like writing instructors and stuff before when I was like doing screenwriting and stuff where they noticed that like my storytelling structure doesn't just follow the typical like three-act structure or anything that they teach in most Western things, but it does align pretty well with some like Eastern storytelling techniques where there's a little more like five-act structures, and the point of the story isn't usually like the heroic journey and stuff. It's a little more like internal. um
Mm,
so I think I subconsciously kind of like got a lot of that in just growing up with those movies. Um, they influenced me a lot more than Disney for some reason, even though I watched a lot of Disney movies too. But the Miyazaki ones really stuck, I think, because I don't know, there's something more to them with like soulful to them. Like I love Disney movies, don't get me wrong. Like they're they're
yeah.
they're great comfort movies, but like Miyazaki films like touched my soul.
Mm,
Like
mm,
it's like, oh. Um, other than that, I am very influenced by video games, and I hope it comes
mm,
across in the stories as they develop. Horizon Zero Dawn is a big influence, a very direct influence because I was playing it kind of like as I was developing Glitch. So there's a lot of like, if you play the game you're gonna recognize a lot of concepts that I'm just like, well, this is cool. I still need to play Forbidden West, but it's fine. I, what's free time? I don't know what free time to play video games is anymore. Um, let's see. And then I'm also just influenced in general by, it's weird to say like dystopian things like Blade Runner and stuff because the comic isn't, but I think I'm influenced by those in the sense that I'm purposefully deviating from those darker
Mm,
tones
mm,
to go the more optimistic route. Um, but yeah, I was honestly more of a fantasy reader than a sci-fi reader growing up, so that's not my biggest influences. Alston, you start going.
Well, off the bat, I can say Avatar and Ghibli are two of our big joiners. Those were definitely two really strong visual touchstones for me. I always like the balance they both have between like really trying to make human characters that I feel like I know real people that embody these moments while also having insane fantasy elements that are just brilliant. Um, but then for Glitch in particular, I also like pull a lot of visuals from, I'm really inspired by like Treasure Planet. I really love that like blend of sci-fi and historical visual touch points.
mm.
So definitely something that we haven't been able to do as much in Glitch as I want, but I'm hoping we have some places coming up in future issues that I really want to blend that kind of history with future tech kind of vibe that you get in Treasure Planet.
I know what you're thinking of.
Nice.
I
I know
know.
you do.
I know.
Also pirates. Let's just be real. I love a
Also pirates,
pirate.
yes.
So that element of Treasure Planet is great. Um, but yeah, those I would say are kind of my biggest touch points, and then just so many like anime manga. Like I couldn't name
Yeah.
them all. I would guess like Full Metal Alchemist is probably another big one that I just love.
People point that one out a lot because the metal arm. Yeah.
Can I see
Which
that in the back?
oh I can't. But is it a poster?
It's it's a it's a hand drawn Full Metal Alchemist poster
Oh,
by
heck
an art.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
by
I
an
messed
artist in
up my
Japan.
audio. Of course I have.
I've been
Yeah.
rewatching Brotherhood lately, so I'm all in full metal mood.
Okay. Controversial question: Brotherhood or the original one?
um, I prefer Brotherhood just because I prefer that like the direction that story took, but the original is still very good. It's just way darker too.
It
Um,
is.
so like they're both very dark, but like I don't know, I feel like the first one somehow was even darker. Um,
Yeah, the
Agreed.
original I did not remember in a super positive light because it like happened. Well, because like I did like it when I watched it, but it also was coming out during that era when a lot of anime was like going way off of the books that they were
mhm.
based off of, and they'd all be like 26 episodes and then end abruptly, and it had gone like completely off the manga. So to
Yeah.
see the original Fullmetal Alchemist doing something similar at the time, I did not. I liked it, but then as I got older, I kept being like, it's not as good. If you're going to watch something, just watch Brotherhood. And I've been
Yeah.
recently finally watching Full Metal Alchemist again, the 2003 version, with a friend who had never seen it and had seen Brotherhood. And it's really wild to watch and be like, ooh, this is a lot better than I remember. Oh, this is really dark.
Well,
Ooh,
especially because the
okay.
beginning is way more detailed. Like, because
Mm,
Brotherhood kind of skims over a lot of those earlier plot lines because they assume you already watched the original one, and they're like, we don't need to really dive into these things anymore. The people who are watching, they know about it, which sucks for all the new people who are watching Brotherhood. It's like, why is this so rushed?
Like,
yeah.
you
It's
still
like,
get
well, people
everything
say
you
like
need to
watch the
get.
beginning of the first one, and then after it deviates, then start watching Brotherhood, and then you've got the
Yeah.
whole like manga story.
Well, watch the beginning of the first one, but skip a couple episodes because there still are some weird filler in the first like dozen episodes.
Yeah.
Which I'm like,
Yeah.
it's the beginning of the series. Why are we already putting filler into this TV
Yeah.
show? But yeah, I would say the opening couple episodes, especially of '03, are like they hit way harder than Brotherhood, which understandably buries the lead a little bit because, like you say, at that point they're like,
Mhm.
you've seen the original anime, you've read the manga, you've watched the 3 OVAs, you've seen the movie, like you've played the 6 video game. Let's just get you've seen this story 18 different times. We're just gonna jump into the
Yeah.
new stuff.
I
But
feel like Full Metal
Amazing.
Alchemist is another one of those inspirations on how we kind of balance the light and the dark too in ours, because that's another one where like it gets so dark, but it's
Mm,
not like it's not an explicitly adult anime, you know? Like it's still I watched the original when I was a kid. Maybe I shouldn't have, but
I
there's a
wouldn't
few
make
things that I
it.
watched when I was a kid that I maybe shouldn't have.
I wouldn't make it R, but I will say I also watched it when I was 12, and I probably should have waited till like 15.
Yeah.
But no, I agree because like especially I remember reading the manga in high school for like the third time, and it really struck me how quickly Full Metal Alchemist could go from like boiling your blood, like freaked out, shaking, like fear and terror, and then like flip the page and there would be a joke and you'd be
yeah,
bursting
yeah,
Yeah.
out laughing and it balanced somehow. And I was like,
Hmm.
ooh, I've always loved stuff that does that. Um,
yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of
so
like
that's
my
something,
goal. Like I don't know if I can successfully do that yet, but that's what I strive for. Like
yeah.
yeah.
And
There's,
that's, I think that's that. Sorry, you were saying.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just saying, like, I think that's the big key difference between Western storytelling and Eastern storytelling as well. Like, uh, the biggest linchpin of Western storytelling is to keep the tone consistent across the whole medium. Like, if the comic is, is dark, just keep it dark across so that the reader gets consistency in in the
Mm-hmm.
proceedings. Whereas Eastern storytelling doesn't actually care about it. It just throws that whole rule book out of the window and says, "I'll insert a joke right after a very serious moment."
Yeah. And
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, occasionally it doesn't quite work, but most of the time it's just it enhances both when you do it right. And
yeah,
yeah.
it
yeah,
hits twice as hard. It's really good.
And it
absolutely.
helps people like me who like I get very bogged down if something's too negative. So the moment, they like throw in a joke, it's like, okay, you've deflated it a bit, like you help keep me in instead of like making me just like leave because I'm like, this is too heavy. I can't. Oh, like this needs to get lighter. Like just a moment. Give me a moment to breathe.
Give me a
Yeah, yeah.
glimpse of hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's just called Marvel Formula because that's what Marvel movies do, I guess. Awesome, awesome. Give us a quick rundown of the rewards and of the stretch goals because you're hitting stretch goals
Yeah.
now.
So we've got a couple digital only tiers, especially because we know international shipping is insane. We learned that last campaign where we severely undercharged for international shipping, and then I went to the post office and tried to ship, and I'm like, it's $30 to send to Australia? What? And I was like, whoops. um, but yeah, so that kind of the digital helps for people who are short on shelf space or international backers who'd like to read it but don't want to pay insane shipping costs.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have the comic. We're offering both the standard and the variant covers at the same price point. So once the backer surveys go out, you'll just be able to choose which one you want. Or if you get a slightly higher tier, you end up with both because we know some people they just like to, have both covers and collect them. Have one to read, one to display, or I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and we also have a nice enamel pin. It's a collection that we're doing. Our first campaign, we had one for the Cactus Clan, and this campaign, we have one for the Bad Bandits, which are Jaws the Rock Eater and Boom. Um, and each issue will have a new like faction that will have an enamel pin, so you can rep them all. And we know people like pins. I like pins; they're fun. And we've
Gotta
also
catch 'em
got
all.
cool comic-sized metal prints of each of the covers.
Ooh.
They're both limited edition. The variant cover metal print is extremely limited edition. It's very limited number on the tier. I think we have like 50 total. Um, and part of those proceeds go to Heather as like a bonus because we're really appreciative for like all the like talent that she threw into this comic when we're just like these newbies who it's like you've done some real big comics. It's like real
I
cool to have
know.
your name on one of ours. Um, So yeah, and then our stretch goals, we've already unlocked our first one, which is digital wallpapers featuring like our promo art. So we have them nicely formatted. We learned that was a little more complicated than we thought because of different types of phones have different dimensions, but we figured it out.
Yes.
Um, uh, Alston, you want to talk about our next one that's coming up soon that hopefully we hit soon?
Um, so we got the digital wallpapers, the vinyl sticker set that you can kind of see the
Final
preview of
stickers.
there. Yeah.
Mm.
We have the Blaine and Knight Rider trading cards. I think I have to check where we're at. Did we hit the next one already? Or are we
Well,
going to the
we've only unlocked the wallpapers so far. We're almost at the stickers.
Oh, got you. I'm
We
head down doing so much art. Don't mind me. I'm totally
Yeah,
out of the loop.
Alston's in art mode. I've been kind of
I'm an
in
art.
Kickstarter mode. And we have revealed, we haven't updated the graphic yet, but we've revealed at 5.5K
Yes,
it's
the
Jaws, the
Jaws
Rock Eater,
and
and Boom's trading cards.
yes.
Um,
That's
and
Uh,
nice.
we're most of the rewards, most of the stretch goal rewards that we're doing, we try to include something digital as well because like we notice in a lot of Kickstarters, most of the stretch goals are all physical things, and it's just like that kind of, leaves the digital only backers out and like the international backers who are only maybe doing digital because of shipping costs. Um,
Mm.
so there are a few tiers of our stretch goals that are physical only, but we tried to put like a really good amount where if there is something physical, there is also something digital, or it's just something digital that everyone's going to be getting. Like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
like I can tease 6K because we
well,
should
you
be
should explain
revealing that
5K
soon.
because we haven't even said 5K yet.
Oh yeah, 5K includes the glitch number one diaries, which is like a behind the scenes PDF that we're doing where you
Nice.
get Ari's thoughts and perspective on events that happened in issue one.
Mm.
Um, so we're just kind of like almost like little mini diary entries. It won't be like super extensive, but it'll be a nice like look. And there's some teases and Easter eggs that are in that one that she maybe mentions things because they're things that she would talk about as someone who lives in this world that maybe you as
Yeah.
the reader haven't gotten to experience yet in the story. So it's kind of like teasing future issues while talking about the first one. And a future stretch goal would have that same concept, but for issue two. So
Right.
then it would be all caught up with what we have revealed.
I think of it
Um,
sort of like how there's sometimes novelizations of movies. You get a little kind of extra detail and a little extra insight into what was going on in every scene from just a slightly
mhm.
different perspective.
That's
Yeah, because
amazing.
we don't do like thought bubbles in our comics. Like that's not like a style we've
Interesting.
chosen. So you don't really get their internal thoughts very often, unless we specifically want to like do that in some kind of stylistic way. So this is like a nice way to see what was going on like in the mind during the action,
That's
or what
amazing.
she like really thinks of things. Um,
Ari,
and
unfiltered.
Ari Unfiltered, that's a dangerous thing. She has
It's
opinions.
very
She
sassy.
she is a sassy teenager. Um,
This
I'm
is
very
very
excited for
cool.
6K. We're about to officially unveil it. Well, once we hit the 4.5K, we're trying to have like three revealed at a time, like so that people
Yeah.
kind of know the roadmap ahead. But I'm
Mm.
cool just saying 6K here because we're close anyway, and I like to have exclusives on these interviews. Um, 6K will be a brand new short comic called The Cactus Chronicles Number One, A Cactus Carol. Semi-holiday themed, but not super holiday themed. Origin story of the Cactus Clan and its mythical original founder,
Mm.
told by Blaine himself. I'm very excited for it. I had a really fun
Interesting.
time writing it using like Christmas Carol as kind of like a foundational story structure for it. Um,
Nice.
and I love the Cactus Clan so much. So I have a whole like slate of I have like 6 short comics planned out already for the Cactus Chronicles. It's fine. We'll be releasing them at some point. The stretch goal will help us release it earlier
Yeah,
than maybe originally planned because we'll have the financial backing to do so. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited for that one. I had a good time.
absolutely. Nice. That's amazing. We're actually coming to time, but it was great having both of you today on the show and, talk about glitch and comics and all the lovely things that we talked about. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show and all the best for rest of your campaign. We'll be sure to signal post it all along.
Of course. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
having us. This was
Yeah, this
amazing.
was really fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.